All right, well, we will get started. I know those of you join early, so you can listen and then get on with your day. So welcome. My name is Julie Shields Rutina, and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And this webinar is part of the MEFA Institute. Hope you visit often to take advantage of all of the trainings and webinars in the MEFA Institute, and know that you can receive PDP credit for those. And this morning, this is about the FAFSA and DESE. And we have a great presenter that many of you probably know, Nyal Fuentes, who is the College and Career Readiness Coordinator at DESE. And with that, I will turn it over to him, but let me just talk about a couple of logistics about the webinar. We are recording it, so tomorrow we will send you the recording and the slides. It will also live in the MEFA Institute if you want to share with your colleagues for them to come and listen and learn. And you can type any questions you have into the Q&A, and we'll make sure to talk about those and answer those. And if you need live transcript, you can press the CC button for closed captioning, and you'll be able to see the words that are spoken across your screen, and you can even pick the language that you see them in. All right, and with that, Nyal, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I see a couple friends here attending. I'd like to say special attention to Bob Bardwell, the Executive Director of MASCA, who is quoted in a great article this morning on GBH about FAFSA. If you do get a chance to check it out, it will probably answer a lot of questions and bring up a lot of concerns that you all have, but it's well articulated. I think should be shared with people who might not be familiar with FAFSA, as some of you, as you've been trying to explain the changes and what's going on. Also, I see Andrea, amongst many other people I like and see. Andrea is here, and she is a great expert on undocumented students and finding financial resources for those students to attend college. Great presenter. If you get a chance to check out any of her recordings, and including one for parents in Spanish, on it would be very helpful. So anyway, those are my accolades, and thank you for the rest of you coming here. Here's today's objectives. I hope you can see this and hear me okay. We're going to talk a little bit about college going data, because this is what it's all about, right? We don't do FAFSA because it's a fun exercise in financing. It's because we're really trying to have kids go to college. I really want to look at this closely, mostly because I don't have a ton of news about FAFSA, so I need to talk about something, but to also really realize that our college going has really gone down, and particularly for historically marginalized groups. It's something we need to concentrate on, and I'm including that students of color and English learners, and in particular, and which is a much larger group, low-income students and their communities. And I'll have a couple data slides around that. Talk about one slide about what is FAFSA. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know what FAFSA is, but it's obligatory. Talk about a little about past FAFSA completion, and then we'll look at the FAFSA tool. From the front here, as you know, there is no data coming from U.S. Department of Education to either colleges, which is more important, and I think it's stressed in that GBH article this morning, meaning kids aren't going to be able to put together financial aid packages, families aren't going to be able to make decisions. It is a freaking disaster. Let's put it that way. But also that those data aren't rolling into Department of Higher Education and us, so we can even get you data to see who's completed. So a lot of it is kind of like until March, when they say the data is coming through, it's going to be old school, talking to kids, making sure they're college ready, and, getting their plans together and completing FAFSA. And then in March, we're going to have to go full tilt on this tool. I'll do another training on this to get school counselors, hopefully with Bob and NASCA, to get the word out about the tool, and get more information about that. Simultaneously, sometime in March, the MASFA will be introduced. So that's another thing that's going to be coming out. So maybe we'll do something together around that, where we start talking about for students who are undocumented and have lived in are graduating from Massachusetts high schools and have been here for 3 years, we'll have an opportunity to access state financial aid under the new tuition equity law that came out in July. So a lot going on there. I won't get too much into that, but I think it's important to think about stuff we're going to have to do in about a month or so, as these data come in, and we're really going to be rushing around to make sure kids are in spots, and first generation families really understand that they have the packages together to go to school and just keep their hopes and dreams. I think it's part of it. It's like, and again, the article's so good because it really talks about getting these kids to, they're going to realize their hopes and dreams, but they're going to have to put it on hold. It's going to be really stressful for the next month or two. And then we'll talk about the tool briefly, because I think that's what you're here for. So talking about college access, and I am an unapologetic advocate of kids going to college. I think there's lots of opportunities for students to, after high school, if they go to a technical program or go in the military, there's tons of opportunities for kids who don't go to college. But we also know in Massachusetts, we have a highly educated population. I think it's like, was it 57% of people 25 to 34 have college degrees, which is way higher than most states, top 2 or 3 at least. I should have that memorized. But I really want to look at it. If it's just about the money, and again, we need plumbers, we need electricians, but most kids even going to technical schools are not going into the high paying trades. They're going to other stuff. So again, unapologetic. I work in an office that supports technical education. I support technical education, but for most kids, college is their best bet. I really want to show this chart because it really shows we have some data around wage matching. So these are 50 percentiles. This is basically the median person in 2010, looking at 11 years later and what their earnings were. And you're talking about almost a $30,000 difference between a high school graduate and a student with a bachelor's degree. Again, this is 50 percentile. So this is the median. We know there's highs and lows. We know there's someone who's, the poetic for many is says, well, the barista with the philosophy degree or whatever. But we know in the median students, you're on average going to, make a lot more money. So if it's just even about the money, I'd like to show this to kids. I mean, they can't imagine being 30 years old, but when they're 30, this is what it means. So for the kid that's graduating from high school and all of a sudden he's got a decent job making $17 an hour, long term going to college is a good bet. We know that immediate college enrollment, and these are 22 numbers. DHE has some enrollment numbers that are looking better for class of 23. Those aren't public yet. And we don't have them in our file because we get National Student Clearinghouse data and it's very delayed. But you can kind of see here, there's a crisis in college going for a lot of students, and particularly looking at Latino students. And that's kind of, where my lifetime has been spent looking at that data and, college enrollment for Latino students. You're talking about over half of students immediately enroll in college, and now it's, almost down to a third. That is just an enormous drop in college going, partially due to COVID and partially due to a lot of different reasons. Economies, you can make your own list, right? The economy is decent. Kids can get jobs right out of high school that pay, minimum wage is $15, right? So it's not a family sustaining wage, but if you're living in, your mom's house, then it might be sustaining for you. So there's a lot of different reasons that kids are not going to college, but it's something that we've done a pretty good job, but this is a generational drop in college going, particularly for Latino students. Similarly, between boys and girls, we have a boy problem. It's not funny, but you really see a huge difference in boys and girls going. So how do we concentrate on getting young men to really look at college as an option again? It could be in 10 years that we have a situation where, women, God forbid, are making more money than men on the average in the state, which would be interesting because, the relationship between college going and income in general. Again, to show more data here, and you'll be able to look at these slides. I think these are powerful slides to look at, and I think it's also good to look at if you're working in a school or district, to look at your school and district and see how this looks. Again, you could disaggregate data a million different ways. I was in a session with a graduate class on Monday at UMass Boston talking about data like this. And it's like, well, what about EL, Latinas, so you can, I think part of it is looking at your student level data and trying to figure out what's going on in your district. But looking at this again, statewide, immediate 22 college going, if you want about Latino males, 29%, you're talking about almost a 50 percentage point difference between the highest kind of gender / race ethnicity group and Latino males. So we know that there's a crisis here. We know there's the same economy for everyone out there. There isn't some secret Latino male, believe me, Latino male economy that exists out there for us to access. So really important to look at this and look at your different student groups and see what's going on. And again, by income, and this is something I think we really need to concentrate on, particularly when we're talking about FAFSA, students who are low income. And I think the big news is, and we'll talk, hopefully this stands in the budget, I'll talk about this a little later, is that there's more state financial aid than there's ever been for students. Hopefully that stands this new budget. This new budget is kind of, it's kind of squirrely at this point with the revenues. But looking at this chart, you're talking about huge differences between non-low income, and this is a generational and zip code replication, right? So if you are a non-low income female, like my daughters, for example, very high chance of them going to college, almost zero chance of them not, right? Unless something happens. And then for low income males, it's very low. And again, if you bring race ethnicity into here, for example, I talked about low income Latino male graduates in the on the little text box over here. It's like less than a quarter of those students are going to college. Any college, right? Community college, four-year college, private, public, whatever it is. This slide I did yesterday, and this is one of these things that this is a Nyal side. It's not done with psychometrics. I didn't do a lot of analysis. I basically lined up what I call the poorest quartile are the poorest, the percentage, the school districts with the highest percentage of low income students. I did a list of 307 districts that sent kids to college. And I did it by, the percentage of poor kids that they have. So obviously the second quartile is very large because obviously like Boston's probably in there and that type of thing. The sizes of them are different. So statistically, this is not completely sound. I think a lot of my people who are psychometricians and other like data nerds would be like, well, you really should have looked at it this way. But this is so striking that it really makes a good point. If you're looking at your, kind of the poorest quartile, the poorest 77, the districts with the highest percentages of low income students, you're talking about 46% of those kids going to college. And then if you're looking at the quote richest, you're talking about 81.5. So again, when it comes to FAFSA, incredibly powerful, something I would show to my school committee if you wanted them to concentrate in FAFSA, to my school, to my superintendent, to my principal. Just to show you what it looks like kind of longitudinally. We were close to 2/3 of students in that quartile going to college in 2016, so 6 years ago. In this data, I know it's actually 8 years ago, but in this data 6 years ago, and look at the drops there compared to you're talking about enormous. You're not only talking about there were gaps, but the gaps are actually yawning and growing. So it just shows that again how important FAFSA is going to be, and I'm leading into the sale of the FAFSA tool eventually, believe me, but I don't have a lot of information on that right now, so I'm obfuscating. I don't know if that's going to work. But anyway, you see these gaps here between richer and poorer districts, and know we have to concentrate on that. So the summary, again, you all experts in this stuff, but median enrollment college is correlated with future earnings. Median enrollment is declining trend both here in Massachusetts and the United States, although hopefully last year we got a little bounce up. And again, the gaps that are going on. There's also a gap between students who score poorly on MCAS versus those who score well on MCAS, which really would kind of indicate a academic achievement gap, meaning that we have students who have weaker in math and English language arts skills that are not attending college at the same rates. So what is FAFSA? I just want you to read this, that understand it's a necessary thing for kids to get federal financial aid, and for a lot of kids, and for our state, other than the massive for undocumented kids, for kids to get state aid, and for a lot of other scholarships as well. So it's pretty much, if you're going to college and expecting any type of aid, you have to do FAFSA, right? Except if you're an undocumented student. This is from Department of Higher Ed. I didn't get a real good chance to update these because this is all in flux, right? We know that there was substantial financial aid for kids, low-income kids that were currently enrolled, like amazing stuff happening with almost no cost for public education for those students. Miraculous change, generational change that could help us to kind of turn these college access rates around if we keep it up in the new budget. Talks a little about here, the whole process here. It's, we make sure kids need to do FAFSA to get state financial aid, as well as their federal aid, and kind of how the whole system works, which everyone here knows more about this than I do. Mass Grant Plus was a huge piece for low-income kids. So we're making sure Pell eligible kids really have the chance to support themselves and go to college. So we know it started in community colleges, went to a state university, and finally our flagship and associated UMass campuses adopted it last year. And Carmen, I'm going to get to you at the end if you don't mind. Just because this is my hardest slide I do because it's not mine. Again, here's some information you can go through. This is about the new this is about the Governor Healy's last year's budget. and passed by the House and Senate, to really make college affordable for low income kids, especially, but also bringing in some of the middle income. And middle income in Massachusetts is, higher than his other places just because the cost of living is so high. So it's really giving families a chance to attend college. And a lot of times and if we're looking at it this way, and hopefully this continues, a chance for kids who would usually say, well, I'm going to Northern Essex and I'm a community college graduate. I love community college, but some kids undermatch themselves because they're just like, I can't afford that. It's insane. They look at the sticker price of a college and they're just like, that's more than my mom earns in a year. So this really allows, and hopefully in the 25 budget, for current seniors and beyond, really looking at this Mass Grant Plus and making college really affordable to our kids. A little about FAFSA completion. And before I get too into this data actually comes from the FAFSA, excuse me. Sorry, of course, when I'm presenting, I'm losing my voice. This data comes from the FAFSA tool. And for those of you who are familiar with the FAFSA tool, sometimes it's not a perfect match. We can't find every kid. I'll talk about that when I talk about the tool, but it's a pretty good indicator. And again, the gaps are the same, regardless of finding the kids or not. So this is the FAFSA completion by income. I like to look at this again because I think we need to focus on students of color and low income kids. And you'll see here the drop that's come. We kind of went down during the real height of COVID. We went down, bounced up a little bit, and then started going back down with low income kids. And again, that might be because there's a lot of jobs available. Who knows? But generally, there's been a little bit of a drop, and again, more for low income kids than higher income kids. A little bit of this looking by race, ethnicity, kind of seeing the same thing. And again, I want to point over here to Latino students, Hispanic Latino students, and the big drop from a few years ago. So there's something really that we need to focus on here with Latino kids and African American kids as well. All kids, but when you're already kind of on the lower part of that opportunity gap, we really need to concentrate on closing with those gaps. Similarly, I wanted to show this data in a different way. You can kind of see the same thing. It is the same chart as when we're looking at college attendance, right? Nobody's doing FAFSA. If they're not going to college, unless the school pushes them to get towards 100% completion, they're just not, if you're not going to college, you're not doing FAFSA. And you're seeing the same thing here. Only a quarter of Latino males are doing FAFSA. We know some of that population might be undocumented kids who don't do it, but largely that does not come close to making up for the gap. So this is kind of stuff we're doing. We are working with DHE and our.
And Niall, can I stop you and ask one question that's in the group?
Sure.
Someone just asked about the statistics. And are there statistics about the number of high school age students who attend a 2-year community college? Are they included or not? And then also, do you have any data divided about who goes to state universities and private?
Sure. So there's a bunch of different places you could find that information. Our success after high school DART, and I could probably put this in after I stop talking. I'll put it in the questions, or maybe I'll just email it to you, Julie, and you can send it to the folks.
Yeah, great.
Success after high school DART would have that information about 2-year college going and 4-year college going. There is some information on school profiles as well. The numbers in school profiles and the numbers in success after high school are a little bit different because they take a different date into account of when kids are enrolled in college, because kids get recorded in National Student Clearinghouse as being recorded in different times. Sometimes it's March, sometimes it's September, sometimes it's August. So the business rules aren't exactly the same. But yes, it is in success after high school DART. It's in profiles. If you have access, if you are in a school or district and have access to Edwin Analytics, which is where our FAFSA report lives. In fact, they live in the same neighborhood. You can look at the numbers by school, by ethnicity, by income, etc. Of not only did they go to 2 4-year private or public, but actually what schools they went to. So if you're looking at if you're from East Boston High School and you want to know how many of your students went to UMass Boston, you could see those numbers and see actual student names there. So if you have that level of access, and if you're in Boston, Bob is somewhere in there crunching a towel in his teeth, you may not have access to the student level information, but someone should. And you should if you're a school counselor. And I'll keep saying that until I drop dead. So yeah, there's tons of places to get that information, both in the public and kind of in the data warehouse on the student level as well. And I'll send that to Julie after this so she can get you that information.
Thanks so much.
So yeah, so we have a partnership with Executive Office and DHE. You might have seen billboards last year. You'll see my background that says you're worth it. Partnering with MEFA as well, and School Council Association, Gear Up, and all sorts of different people to get the word out about this. Some partnerships with You Aspire. Some of your districts might be working with You Aspire on the state taxpayers' dime. Others of you have individual contracts with them. We kind of have a limited amount of funding to put there, but we want to target some of the districts that have lower FAFSA completion rate. And of course, kind of what we'll be doing a little bit now, but more in the future about how to use our Edwin data warehouse to identify those kids. So that's kind of what we've been working on. We know this window opened January 1st. Everyone, again, is pretty familiar with this. I read in Bob's article this morning that 35 million, 3.5 million kids. I don't even know what the number was. Millions of kids have completed FAFSA and adults. None of that information is flowing, even though the window is open. None of it's flowing to colleges, so there's no packages being put together, and we are not getting this. It's called ISER. Is that Julie? People laughed at me because I spelled it out the other day. Data.
Oh yeah, ICERs, yeah.
People are still laughing at me, but I'm used to it at this point. They're not flowing to colleges or us until early March. I don't know how that data is coming out. They've given us no indication if it's coming out in batches or all at the same time. But believe me, as soon as we get it, we're going to put it in the FAFSA tool. Talked to our IT people yesterday to make sure they're prepared for that. So as soon as we get the information, you will get the information. With that being said, talk a little about what you actually came here for today in the next, few minutes. What is the Edwin FAFSA tool? They're now available for districts, so you can see data from the past. This might be a good time if you don't have access to Edwin and you're in a school or district that you go and make sure you have access to Edwin. If you don't have student level access, you'll only be able to see what's called the CR 307 report, which is a summary for your districts. And if you have multiple high schools here, it will give you an indicator of a summary of how many kids have, I'll go over this in a second, have completed FAFSA and how many kids are what we call not found, meaning we have no record of that completed FAFSA. The CR 607 report is a student level report, and that's where you're able to see, Juan Gonzalez and Ruben Sierra and whether they completed FAFSA. And if they haven't, tracking those kids down and making, getting out to a school counselor, getting in touch with them and say, hey, Ruben, you haven't completed FAFSA. And I'll name other Texas Rangers as we go along. Sorry. So we take FAFSA data from USED, from the US Department of Education, comes to the Department of Higher Education, and we match this to data that's submitted by districts through SIMS. So every one of your districts puts a list of kids up, and we do what's called a SACID match. So, but we don't have SACIDs. So USAID doesn't have SACIDs, they have social security numbers, and I'm gonna talk about this in a second. And we have SACIDs. So we have to do this algorithm that matches first name, last name, date of birth, gender, which has become even more complicated to get that information correct and show the student has completed FAFSA. I'm gonna go over that in a second. It's dynamic. It's been getting to the point that it's updated 2 or 3 times weekly. It runs about a week behind kids actually, families actually submitting FAFSA. And this link is a pretty good link to kind of my description, our description of what the tool does and what it is. I think this tool is sometimes helpful if someone doesn't want to give you access. Like, why do you need to see student level access? And again, if you're a school counselor, why the hell wouldn't you know everything about these kids? Knowing their MCAS scores is not going to kill anybody. To really know how to tool and advocate for yourself for access. So now is the time to get access to Edwin. Edwin looks like this. If you haven't used it before, you sign into the account, you have to verify your identity. They send you a 2-factor authentication, and then you get into a list of different things and click on Edwin Analytics. So this is security portal. That's how you get in. The question from Diane: you can't see current data because it has not been sent by U.S. Department of Education, and neither have colleges. So all this information that kids have sent, we don't have because USED hasn't sent it and won't send it to March. Really encourage you to read that article. We'll send a link to that as well in GBH because it gives you an idea of how, I don't know, as school counselor, I'm talking how frustrating it is that we don't have this information yet. So now we're still back to where we were 5 years ago, asking kids, did you do this? Did you do this? Until we get that information from U.S. Department of Education. So this is how you get in Edwin. Edwin is our security portal. Again, all sorts of different information, not just FAFSA tools. There's the college reports. There's usually MCAS reports that a lot of people use. Early warning indicator system that I also work closely with around using early warning data, and all sorts of things. This is what the Edwin page looks like. You're going to click on these different groups. This stuff is being high school and beyond. And usually you can see all sorts of different, you can also just use a search box and you put FAFSA in, you'll find it. But if you really want to learn about all the different stuff that's in there, you can really dive into the Edwin homepage. And when you go into Edwin, really important, you got to hit this green button. This is the new thing. We did this data migration, which was not fun, into these new tools. So it's very important. You're going to look at this and go, why isn't my data coming up? You have to hit this green button. This is so important that I actually made a whole slide about it. So Kate made a slide about it. So it's really important to get that so you can see your data. When you're in Edwin, again, there's two different reports. There's the district school view. That's what you'll all be able to see. If you have student level access, you are going to be able to go to the 607 report, which is the most important part. When you select the award year, it says a lie. It will actually be 24, 25. I apologize for not changing that. Because they don't use this year, they use what the award year is. And for DHE and for USED, University, I keep saying University, United States Department of Education, they use when the kids are actually going to college. A kid is shown as the file either as submitted, which means they actually have completed the FAFSA, hit submit, and it's gone into the system, or not found. Also within submitted, it says complete or not incomplete. A lot of times kids will have done something like, hey, there's no signature, you're missing this, and it just gives an indication of you need to go back and fix this and change this. Again, this doesn't exist right now because we don't have the information. This is kind of what it looks like. This is Abby Kelly because it's first in the alphabet. This is accurate. It will be 24 to 25. This is what a summary report looks at. It's going to give you a state and percentage and that type of thing. And it's going to look at your district, right? And this is probably the high level information that a superintendent or principal might want to see, or school committee. What percentage of your kids have been complete, gone as completed. If you have multiple high schools, they'll be listed on below, and there'll be a blue link that you can click on so you can just look at that high school. This is a student level report. This is the most important piece that you'll see. The beauty of the student level report is that you can download it to Excel. So if everyone doesn't have access to Edwin, you might have one person who goes in, if you're a smaller school, and says, all right, I download this to Excel. Here's all the kids who haven't completed. Go chase these kids down. And this is where a lot of times school counselors get to, they get their highlighter out, they get their markers out, they circle the kids, they try to find them. Looking across the top here, there's all this information I redacted around the high school name, district name, SASA, and that type of thing. A date of birth, gender, all this information is really here. So and this is how I calculate information, or I can go into it and see, like, do we have opportunity gaps for kids completing FAFSA? And if we have groups, like, let's say you have a group of some Latino college mentor program that you might be like, okay, we need you to go chase all of our Latino boys that have not completed FAFSA. So it gives you a really good chance to filter out and do all sorts of, internal analysis to do this completion. You also see that, I'll go into this in a second, the date they completed FAFSA, the date they submitted FAFSA, and yes or no, did they submit? That's a good thing to filter on, and what the status is. And sometimes some detail, like, so it will say if it is incomplete, that's missing a signature, missing information, that type of thing. So this can be really helpful as you move along. So I think this is the most important thing to really focus on when these report comes out. Because you can look at the kind of scoreboard data that shows you, here's the percentage we're doing, but it's really important to figure out who hasn't and really chasing those kids down. So there's some kids who might apply to college, don't even know what FAFSA is. And there's a lot of different reasons kids don't complete FAFSA. Sometimes, dad's like, I'm not sharing my information with big government, or whatever it is, or they're undocumented, et cetera, or, it's nobody's business how much money they make. But this gives you an idea of how to chase these students down. One of the issues we've been having is when we can't do a match. So what we do is, again, we take this information from U.S. Department of Education, which has a social security number, name, date of birth, etc. And then we do not, and we will never have in our state files, social security numbers of students. So we can't do a perfect match based on that kind of what we would usually do is using the same type of variable that is exactly alike. So we have to run an algorithm that matches names. And sometimes, and dates of birth and gender. And sometimes it gets confusing. There's a lot of different reasons that sometimes kids are using a different name in Sims than like it might be Lizzie instead of Lisa or something like that in Sims versus in what they did for FAFSA. A lot of times it's because of Latino naming conventions. So if you are using the paternal and maternal last names for one of the documents, they're not matching very well. The algorithm does pretty well. People always say, well, we have a ton of kids, and it ends up being like 2 or 3 kids that they don't match. So this is what, this is the only way we can actually run the data. But it's really important to think about, tracking down your kids. The beauty of this is even if the kids aren't matched, and that's what's going to show up in that first part, in the next part, there's what we call unmatched data. It's important to go there too, because a lot of times, if a student says they went to your high school, we're going to capture that data in unmatched students. There's a little noise in there because sometimes those students say they went to their schools, and they really didn't. Or it's the last school they went to before they went to private school. So there's in that unmatched list, you're going to find a lot of your kids. You're going to find some guy who's 35. I think we might have changed the age stuff, and did go to Assabet, but it just happens that they put that on high school. So there's an unmatched list as well, which can be very important. Again, the scoreboard data is going to come out, what your, summary data is going to come out of those matched kids. Important to look at the unmatched file as well to try to find those kids that we haven't matched. And again, I always suggest putting this in Excel. It's just much easier to read and make your problem smaller than it is, or your challenges smaller than it is. Because once you kind of sort through it and go through, it's like, I know this kid's not going to do it. I know this kid isn't. Then you get down to, you go down from 500 down to, 75 students that I need to concentrate on these kids. And sometimes, now we know that there's kids that aren't making college plans till May. And for a lot of those students, you're going to be chasing these kids down through June. And I know in the case of some of my friends, chasing them down all summer as they try to find some school counselor who happens to be working in some basement somewhere to help them to get their stuff together. So I call this the Alex said they did FAFSA. Don't go and hit a kid over the head with a 2x4 because it says right here you did. Sometimes they did. Usually I'm trusting data, but sometimes the data is wrong. I'm going to take some questions. I'll start with Bets. I apologize, I pronounced your name wrong. It is the same with Clearinghouse. And there's I don't know how you fix it. I mean, you do the algorithm the best you can. There's no way of doing a case-by-case basis when you have, 70,000 high school graduates, 70,000 high school seniors going by the list and figuring it out, because then you're likely to get it wrong. So it mostly matches. I would guess it's probably like 97%. People always say like 50% didn't match, and then when you go through it, you're like, well, they did. And we did some stuff with Worcester, and I don't know if there's anyone from Worcester here, looking at a lot of kids, and we figured out what happened. I mean, you could kind of go through, and in most cases, it was, a Latino naming convention, names spelled wrong, names that are completely different than the student had, and and there's a lot of different reasons. It largely falls in students who are newer immigrant students and Latino students, and people who use the European convention of dates. So if your birthday was November 7th, I don't know how old are seniors now, 2004? Geez, how old are kids now? They might put, in the States, you're using 11/7. If you're from France, you're doing 7/11, and that's screwing the matching algorithm altogether. So I think it's in this particular purpose, it's good because you have student level data and you have unmatched data, so you can actually do the work to find those kids. So that's what I got today. I'm happy to take any questions either in the chat, I guess, about what's going on.
Yeah, we have a nice, just a small-ish group, but small enough that, yeah, open up any conversation that we want to have about any of these things would be great.
Sure. I get paid either way, Julie.
That's right. That's right. And I'll just say this, Niall, your whole presentation has so much good information. So please do share it with your colleagues. I think it's a lot of information in a relatively short period of time that I think is important for people to hear. And then of course, to understand how to use the tool is so great too.
Yeah, and Bob, we'll do this again, hopefully in early March. We'll schedule something with MASCA, sorry, Bob Bardwell, with Massachusetts School Council Association. And actually, really, because I know people are ready to jump in. It's frustrating right now. And believe me, I was like, Julie, are we really going to do this? People are just going to yell at me. And it really isn't my fault this time that FAFSA data isn't available. All right, thanks, Bob.
I guess the last thing I'll just say so that those of you on the line will know, MEFA is holding a webinar for counselors just about all of the FAFSA issues and some tips and tricks of what we're learning of, helping students and making sure they answer this question right or that question or don't. And so we're learning a lot to help students get through. And so definitely come back into the Institute and find the date for that. I think it's February 15th, but I'm not 100% sure. And join that if you want to just talk with colleagues and talk about how we're getting better and better at advising students on getting through this process.
And I do have to say, not just because I like Julie, and I think she is a jewel in the college affordability crown, is that MEFA is doing some great some of their events that are taped are I don't call it taped anymore, recorded are very good and great information. And we take information from MEFA and we try to distribute it to folks in the field as well.
Thank you, Nyla. And that is February 15th in the same time, 8:30 to 9:30. So thank you. And there is a question. Okay, this is a good question, but I did a NEACAC webinar Monday, and while it initially sounded good that some colleges were delaying their deposit deadlines, we were reminded that the bills will still go out at the same time. Bills still due at the same time. But I guess what I would say is that every day we're seeing colleges make a decision in the direction of flexibility. So I know I'm always wearing the rose-colored glasses, but I am going to believe that we will see more of that. And so and all of us are asking that of our colleagues. And I know the college folks I know understand. I mean, their work has been turned upside down too. So I'm going to hope for that.
I mean, yeah, I guess if I can make just a random comment, this sucks, particularly for first generation low income families who it's like whose hopes and dreams. And again, I think the GBH article is great in capturing this. And I don't even know how to talk to people about it. I'm hoping that from our Department of Higher Ed colleagues, we get a very general, comprehensive across the 28 campuses answer around what this is going to look like as far as deadlines and that type of thing. But we'll keep pushing to get that answer out to you.
No, Nylan, thank you for that. Yeah, you know what, it's true. We do have to admit that it's very, very, very hard to be working with students these days who are at a standstill. And all right.
Well,
Anything else
for having me today. I hope it was helpful. I will send the information about where to find data about college going to Julie. I'm just saying that to remind myself right now. And I guess you can get it out to the folks who attended or registered at least.
Thank you so much, Niall. Terrific. And thank you to everyone and enjoy your days.
Bye.
Thank you.